Sam. Con, how do we say it? Con. That's what the chat room. They love you, Sam. Good to have you back with us today on 365 Sports. So when you saw yesterday evening the college football playoff, the commissioners, and well, we need to kind of reboot this thing, and we got time and all that stuff. But what was your thoughts when you saw that I keep on saying back to square one, which in business terms, that's what they're doing.
Funny enough, I didn't see it last night. I was deep into working on some other stuff, but I saw it this morning kind of casually. I'll be completely honest with you. I have kind of checked out of following the updates of the college football playoff format because on one hand, I kind of resigned myself to the fact that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get what they want, but if they don't agree on what they want, then maybe we'll stick with what we have now, which is not so bad. Because I never understood the rush to expand it after 1 year. And I think we've talked about this before is maybe take a little bit larger sample size before we rush to expand the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have my skepticism because they're trying to tinker with the selection committee and the metrics and all that stuff. And the bottom line is they're going to try to tilt it to the direction of those two conferences. So that's part of why I've checked out of it because just tell me what it is when it's over. But I will say this, the more that we push it off and the longer we take to actually decide on something, I think the better, because that, to me, increases the chance that they either A, we stick with the status quo, or B, if they do tweak the format, that we're not increasing automatic qualifiers, that we're going 5 plus 11, which I think to me is the only acceptable way to expand. It's either 5 AQs with 11. Well, I shouldn't say the only way. 5 AQs with 11 at large, 10 AQs for every conference with 6 at large, or no AQs with 1 through 16. To me, those are the only 3 acceptable formats. Anything that has multiple automatic bids for a conference to me is dead on arrival.
Yeah, Sam, it is funny that you sign a memorandum of understanding. You think you're going to be able to come to something. One side comes up with a plan, the other one takes it to its people, and they're like, "Well, that's dumb. We don't need the help." Like, I think that's the funny thing about the SEC is their coaches were like, "Well, we don't need that. We don't need if you're going to make it 16. Like, we'll try to get 8. Like, don't worry about that. Like, we don't need their help." And then now it's kicked off this little tete-a-tete that's slowed down the process.
They don't. And we've went over this. I think they've gone over the numbers over the last, if you were to extrapolate this format over the last decade, the SEC and the Big Ten would have the most teams in it. So what are we doing? Why do we need extra automatic qualifiers? And if anything, I think that's what Greg Sankey and the SEC coaches figured out, is that if we have only 4 automatic qualifiers, they may actually be limiting themselves because the deference is going to be given to the SEC schools. I don't have to tell you that, Paul, after 2023, but that's the thing that also makes me puzzled and fascinated by this, is that in 2023, we already went through this when a 1-loss Alabama got in over an undefeated Florida State, but we're trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater because a 3-loss Alabama did not get in over SMU, who had 2 losses. And so you only have to rewind a year earlier to see where the SEC got that deference. And in most cases, most years, they are going to get that in an at-large format.
So this is random, but we were just talking about Texas Tech announcing that Graham Harrell is going to be joining their Ring of Honor. He's the 12th member. What pops to mind for you when you think of Graham Harrell and just his place in college football, his place when it comes to Texas Tech?
The 2008 Texas game, that throw to Michael Crabtree on the right sideline. He's more than that. I mean, he is probably, I know there's a lot of Patrick Mahomes love, and deservedly so, but as a program quarterback and for what he accomplished and what that team accomplished, Graham Harrell is probably the standard for Texas Tech, certainly in this century. Mahomes individually is the best, but they didn't really have a lot of success, and that wasn't his fault. They had no defense when Mahomes was there. They actually had a respectable defense when Harrell was there. But Harrell, to me, is the standard bearer of Texas Tech quarterbacks at the college level. And so, but the first thing that pops to mind is that night in Lubbock when they had 3 field stormings, by the way, if you guys remember. People stormed the field, they kicked the extra point, and then at the kickoff, they stormed the field, and then they had to put it back, and they kept doing it until finally they finally got the clock to run out, and then everybody ran onto the field and had a blast. That was a peak moment in Texas Tech history. But Harrell was such a prolific, and he was a prolific high school quarterback too. That's the other thing. He put up great numbers at the high school level and broke some Texas high school records there. So great quarterback. Interesting. I was having a discussion the other day. His coaching career hasn't gone quite like I thought it would.
No.
He had that really good run at North Texas. And then after that, it hasn't really gone the way he is. He's back in Texas at Abilene Christian now as the offensive coordinator. So he's succeeding Rick Bowie over there. So I'm interested to see if he kind of gets it back going, because I thought he did a really good job when he was with Seth Luttrell at UNT. But great quarterback, seemed to be a good offensive mind, and really a guy who lives in Texas Tech lore.
The part about that throw to Crabtree, it hung in the air for what seemed like forever. Great catch by Crabtree. Texas had it covered pretty well, overran it, and so did the safety, and he goes skipping into the end zone.
It's one of those like the kick six, a few years ago, and you have to watch it 100 times to see the 5,000 different things that are happening, like the guy missing the tackle and where he was on the sideline. And yeah, like that's one of those, where were you? I remember exactly where I was when this happened. And I remember exactly where I was when that happened. That was incredible. One of the craziest things I've ever seen.
And he scored with 1 second left in the game. You could have kicked a field goal to win it. They were down one, but yeah, go ahead, Sam, with your thoughts.
We set out to design a cap that could represent Boston. Blue collar, it's hardworking, it's loyalty, it's passion. I grew up with a group of friends where we're extremely tight-knit. All the people that you see on the ads are either my childhood friends or my brothers. We like to bust each other's chops.
Boston Scally sucks.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I remember, it was Curtis Brown, I think, was covering him on that play. And
from Gilmer, Texas.
And Crabtree's a big guy. He was, or at least physically imposing, and it just looked like there was no stopping him. And you would have thought, I think, too, I wonder if there was some, I never did ever get to talk to Curtis Brown about this. I did a piece on that game back on the 10th anniversary. I don't think he ever got back to me, but I would love to know, did he think that Crabtree was going to step out of bounds because of the time? Because like you said, with the situation in the game, it would have been sensible to step out of bounds, but Crabtree wasn't going to be denied. And you talk about great players in Texas Tech history. That guy was incredible. And I think really him and Harrell both helped change that program and change the perception of that program. I mean, they were number 2 in the country after that game. And so that they were in that national championship race. And then we know what happened in Oklahoma. And then we had the 3-way tie at the end of the season. That was a really a fun time for Big 12 football, when the Big 12 was really one of the premier conferences, maybe the premier football conference at the time.
That's when the SEC coaches were calling it gimmicky offenses, and they're trying to downplay it as much as possible, only to then adapt parts of those offenses years later. And they go, now it's cool. Now we're doing it. But yeah, at the time I remember, they don't play defense. It's all gimmicky. And yeah, what a time.
Funny how that works.
That was a lot of fun, though.
Funny how that works. I remember Kevin Sumlin and Texas A&M and Cliff Kingsbury and Johnny Manziel bringing that gimmicky offense.
Yeah.
Did pretty well that first year. And then all of a sudden Nick Saban starts to do it. And then it took off around the SEC. It's kind of funny how all that works.
Yeah, it's kind of like the kid who won't have a beer in high school, and then he gets to college and he's like, I'm not doing it. And then he takes that first sip. He's like, I love beer. This is the best. Girls
throwing the football,
now.
be successful. Who knew?
Yeah.
You didn't have to play 9-6 football games.
No. Sam, Texas A&M in recruiting right now is killing it. They just got the number 1 cornerback in the country. They're getting all this. We've seen this before. So my question is, how do they screw this class up? Or is Mike Elko, is he a guy who's learned enough to not fall into some of the traps they did before? Kevin Sumlin had that class that was number 1 in the country, and then only half of them really even made it through their freshman year because they had a lot of off-the-field problems. And then Jimbo Fisher's, for a variety of different reasons, dissipated to where it was nowhere near what he roped in.
Yeah, no, I don't have as much skepticism now as I would if it were a Jimbo Fisher class, because I do think that Mike Elko and his staff, he's got a really good personnel staff. Derek Miller, the GM over there, does a really good job. They have one of the largest personnel staffs in the country. I think they do a good job of finding not only good players, but people that fit them, that fit what they're going to do, that fit what they want to be. not just from an on-field standpoint, but from an off-field character standpoint. I think that was one thing when you talk about that 22 class at A&M, the number one class of all time. The biggest problem was not the talent that they recruited. The biggest problem was the personality fit. That there was no real regard for character. Jimbo Fisher was taking guys because they were talented, regardless of whether they were a position fit or regardless whether they had any red flags in their background. And I think Elko is a lot smarter than that. And I think he was there for the front end of that at that class before he left to take the Duke job. And I think he's seen enough of what went wrong at Texas A&M to know what not to do. So then that said, as optimistic as I am for them with that, I'm not going to put a ton of stock into it. And this is not A&M specific, but just in general, I think we are moving into an age where it's hard to put a ton of stock into recruiting classes because of how quickly they can turn over. Because you may sign 25 guys or 22 high school guys, but 7 or 8 of them may get in the portal in year 1, and then another 5 or 6 may get in the portal after year 2. So because of how volatile it is right now, unless you're signing some of these guys to multi-year contracts, I think I'm taking some of the recruiting rankings and nationally with a grain of salt, with some exceptions. Obviously, Ohio State has built a pretty good machine, and there are some programs, Georgia, who recruit at a certain level. Texas, I think you can even throw Texas A&M into that conversation where you can maybe put a little more stock into it. But after you get past the elite classes at the top 5, top 10 classes, I think you have to really be skeptical and be a little guarded about how much stock you put into them, because even though that's still the foundation of how you build your championship team and how you should build your championship team, it can change in a blink. And so I think you have to just be a little measured with how you judge them.
Yeah, it's crazy how much my interest has tanked in traditional recruiting in the last just couple of years. I mean, it's nowhere close, because it's like, hey, we got this 5-star. Was he going to be there 2 years from now? Probably not, depending on who you are. So I guess they're gonna have to enforce like the one-time transfer to ever fix this, right? I mean, to make it to where it actually matters the way that it used to matter, because contracts are a tricky thing just in terms of buyouts and all that. I don't think they're really trying to do that. So outside of collective bargaining, I mean, the transfer would be the only way to kind of try and get it back to where it used to be, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think that genie's going back in the bottle, though. I think the one-time transfer thing is done, and I don't think that's going back. I think the only way to do it is with multi-year contracts, and the only way to really get that to be stable is through collective bargaining. Yeah. And that's just, I think, I hesitate to say it, but I think we're going to get there at some point.
I do too.
But it's going to take a while, because the schools and the NCAA and the conference commissioners, the powers that be, do not want to go down that road. But I think over time, I have heard a little bit from coaches and even some ADs who I think understand that is the way to fix a lot of it. Because if you can do that, then you can get some of the problems solved that you can't without having the lawsuit. Because if you have the parties collectively bargaining, then you can say, okay, they agreed to this, so we can enforce it. And so I think even though I know they're trying to push for a law, I don't know. Is it possible? Yes. Do I think it's feasible, and would it hold up? No. I think it's more likely that in the long run, collective bargaining would be the long-term solution.
You mentioned on the college football playoff that you've kind of just gone off you've just zoned out on that. Isn't that the case with so many things right now in college football, from the settlement to that and everything else involved?
Not necessarily with everything. I think it's just once certain things reach a fever pitch. The problem with the playoff discussion, and the reason why I feel that way, is because I feel like we've been doing this for 4 years, ever since 2021, when they first tried to expand it to 12 teams. Because how many meetings do the board members and the commissioners and the ADs and everybody involved in the college football playoff, how many meetings do they have without actually doing something? That's why it has fatigued me a little bit, because I'm kind of over it. And also, I would say this, and I don't think I'm the only one that feels this way, but to me, who wins the national championship is far from the most important thing in college football. That's not the reason I watch college football, is to see who wins the national championship. For me, it is still at its heart of hearts a parochial regional sport. And most fans are going to care about their school, the schools in their conference, and the schools close to them or their rivals. And to me, that's where my interest still is nationally, of course, and part of my job. I cover the roster management and transfer portal, all that stuff, and all the movement and all the effects of the House settlement play into that. But I do think it becomes a lot of noise at some point, and you've gotta kind of try to sift through all of this and find the trees amidst the forest, because there's just so much coming. And the other thing is we are in June. So I think it's a lot easier to talk about this stuff right after the playoff and right after the season's over, as opposed to June, when we now have been multiple months without football and we're kind of get into that home stretch where we kind of feel the season coming. Like, I'm at the point where I'm on the phone and I'm talking football right now. Like, I'm talking to coaches and we're talking about ball, like what their team is looking like, because now the rosters are pretty much set. Nobody's really making a lot of roster changes at this point. So now we know what these teams look like. And so I'm at that point now where I'm looking forward to football, to actual games, trying to see who's going to be good, what we're going to, and not even just for the playoff, like who's going to be good, who's going to win all these conferences, who's going to be mixed for some of these spots, not necessarily who's going to win it all. So the format to me, the more they tweak it and the more they try to do this multiple IQ thing, the less authentic it feels like a championship. I think you guys sat with Mac Rhodes recently and he had said it. He goes, you got to earn your way into it. To me, there's nothing about multiple AQs that earns your way into it. That's a favored status that you're giving to a conference. And so if they're going to do that, then honestly, I would lose interest in the playoff in the long run. Like, it would be less interesting to me if you were giving multiple AQs to the Big Ten and the SEC, even the Big 12. Like, to me, multiple AQs is a non-starter. And to me, that would wane some of my interest in the playoff in the long run.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, let's focus on the postseason in week 0 and week 1, and that being the story. That's also ESPN's fault a lot of the time.
That's our fault too. I'm not gonna lie, we're guilty of it as well.
For sure, yeah.
But because you're trying to contextualize the sport for a national audience. But yeah, I'm not concerned about who's making the playoff in week 1 and week 0.
Right. Yeah. Has anybody just in your conversations, speaking of ball, not maybe changed your opinion, but has put your thoughts about a certain program or something in a different place than maybe it was based on conversations heading into this season?
Yeah, it's, I will tell you this. I feel really good about Clemson. I feel like maybe they have become a trendy team to jump onto this year in the national landscape. You hear a lot of really good feedback on where they are from a talent standpoint, a roster standpoint, and Cade Klubnik, who's a veteran, who seems like he's kind of turned the corner and figured it out. From a Big 12 standpoint, I'm really intrigued by what the top of the conference is going to look like. But the thing about the Big 12 that stands out to me is how many good quarterbacks are in this league. I think when you look at it from top to bottom, like the big name quarterbacks that are making on the top of these top 10 lists are the SEC guys, your DJ Lagway, your Archman, your Lenora Sellers, your John Mateer. But to me, the deepest conference in terms of quarterbacks right now is the Big 12, because look at how many returning starters you've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're looking at about 10 returning starters in this conference out of 16. And at the top, like, to me, out of that top 3, Sam Leavitt, Josh Hoover, Sawyer Robertson, I would throw Rocco Becht in that conversation. Like, those are really talented guys who are all returning starters, who are experienced guys that are going to have their teams in the mix. And then you look at, we talked about Texas Tech a lot this offseason. Is Baron Morton going to be able to turn that corner now that he's fully healthy and through the shoulder injury? Is Avery Johnson going to be able to bounce back and have a little bit of a better year? What does Devin Dampier bring to Utah, especially following his offensive coordinator? I'm really intrigued by him. Can Jalen Daniels stay healthy? If he does, that, to me, Kansas is interesting. Noah Fafita, you guys were talking about Seth Deggy earlier. I've heard a lot of interesting feedback about how a lot of coaches think Seth Deggy's going to get Fafita right after what happened last year and things didn't go so well for him. They think offensively, from a schematic standpoint, he's going to do what fits Fafita a little bit better, and maybe that means a bounce back for him even with T-Mac gone. So it's going to be to me, I'm fascinated to see how the quarterbacks and how the pecking order shakes out in the Big 12, because I think it's going to be a dogfight every week in this conference with as many good quarterbacks as you have in it.
Sam, you mentioned Clemson there. What do you think about Miami in that league? Do you think that they can hang? I mean, Clemson has a lot of returning players. Miami is kind of doing the transfer portal thing right now while they have maybe a better base of recruits than they had 2 years ago. I'm curious as to what you think about them with Carson Beck stepping in.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm very skeptical about Carson Beck. The elbow injury is a one concern because, and I know the progress seems like everything's going well and everything's going smoothly and he'll be supposedly be ready for week 1. But I'm sure you guys watched that game. It didn't look like a pretty injury until you're throwing elbow. And so that's one concern. The other concern is he didn't play well last year. Like he was like, okay, Miami was on the cusp of getting to the ACC title game before that loss late in the season. Do we think that Carson Beck is going to get them to that level that Cam Ward did? Because in my opinion, he's not as dynamic a player as Cam Ward is. To me, Cam Ward can make things happen off schedule. He can create. Yes, he sometimes made some silly decisions, but for the most part, you knew when he had the ball in his hands, he could make something happen. You could get him scrambled. Carson Beck's not a statue. He is an athlete and can move a little bit, but to me, he doesn't make things happen at the same level that Cam Ward does. And I think the picture has to be clean for him. If the pressure is coming, I feel like he got a little rattled last year. And some of the decisions, some of the throws he made just really had me scratching my head. So I'm really fascinated to see what Shannon Dawson does with him, because I do think Shannon's a really good coach. And I do think offensively he can get them right. But I'm just not there on Carson Beck. So I think Miami's going to be good, but do I consider them, a slam dunk go win the ACC? No, I think they're a clear tier behind Clemson in that regard.
Kahn with us on Thursdays, most every Thursday. Sam Kahn from theathletic.com, one of the absolute most popular guests we have on the show. We appreciate it. It's good to see you. Have you had a chance to decompress a little bit?
A little bit. I'm going to have some time in July too. I got a couple weeks off that I'm taking in July. So I will have some more time, but it's been, we had a little bit of time to decompress, and then we're just grinding out on a few things here before we get to the end of the month. So
you mentioned how 10 starting quarterbacks back. Did that include Retzloff?
Yes, that is including Retzloff. Yeah, obviously not knowing what the situation is there. But I'm including Retzloff in there.
He was very, very good. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, with us on Thursdays almost all the time. Not every week, but every Thursday for the most part here on 365 Sports.